Please join me in prayer. Open our eyes that we might see wondrous things all around us. Amen. Just inside the front entrance of our church is the Awe Board. It was created back in February for the 40 days of the season of Lent, from Ash Wednesday until yesterday. 40 days of awe, we've called them. Our Jewish siblings provided the inspiration for this theme. They call their high and holy days from Rosh Hashanah to Yom Kippur the Yamim Noraim in Hebrew, the days of awe. We've challenged ourselves as a church to seek one experience of awe each day for 40 days. 40 days of awe. Easter is the 41st day. The Awe Board records some of our awe experiences. The Awe Board's background looks like a night sky. We write our awe experiences on stars and stick them on the board's sky. The inspiration for this idea comes from Ithaca's own Carl Sagan, who once said, "We need only look up if we wish to feel small." And he added, "By far the best way I know to engage the religious sensibility, the sense of awe, is to look up on a clear night." Here are some things that you've written on stars and stuck on the Awe Board during Lent. Shooting stars, waterfalls, the church's choir, rainbows, earth shine on a crescent moon, crow tracks in the snow, family members, friends, the ocean, pets, a satellite moving across the sky, children laughing together, nature, home, church comfort food at dish-to-pass meals, trees slowly turning green as spring arrives, a large room filled with people singing together, birds returning from the south, the rhythms of the seasons, spring flowers, rocket launches, biking on the beach, a smiling baby, snow-covered trees, having fun, the patience of a friend, walks in Sapsucker Woods, Coldplay performing on Saturday Night Live, a baby learning to crawl, sunshine, and one of you wrote, "Being shown kindness when I was afraid." We know awe when we experience it. We might feel chills, or get goosebumps, or get choked up, or tear up. We might gasp or gape in wonder and say, "Wow," or "Whoa." Each evening during Lent, if the sky was clear, I was intentional about looking up for a few minutes at the vastness above. And each morning during Lent, when I drove to church from Fall Creek, I paused to look at the falls. They rage and foam at this time of year, and they're glorious. I used to get antsy when a car with out-of-state plates in front of me slowed to a crawl or even stopped, so the tourists inside could look at the falls. But now I'm the one slowing down to capture a brief moment of awe in the morning. And I can't count how many times I've said, "Whoa," when I pass the falls. I'm the one who wrote waterfalls on the Awe Board. UC Berkeley professor Dr. Keltner studies the physiology of awe. He researches what brings us awe and how awe affects our bodies. In a massive study, he and his team collected 2,600 stories of awe from 26 countries in 20 different languages. After sifting through the data, they isolated 8 things that bring people awe regardless of where they're from, regardless of culture, race, language, political affiliation, or religion. Here they are. Witnessing our fellow human beings doing acts of kindness or courage brings us awe. It's called moral beauty. Moving together in groups at festivals or parades or marches or in stadiums brings us awe. It's called collective effervescence. Keltner found that people even feel awe when doing the wave in a crowd at a sporting event. Nature brings us awe. It's called wild awe. Waterfalls, mountains, the Grand Canyon. Music and the visual arts bring us awe. Paintings, architecture, patterns. Religious experiences bring us awe. Stories about life and death bring us awe. And number 8 on the list, epiphanies. Things like scientific discovery, mathematical symmetry, new philosophical insights, personal transformations. 8 sources of awe. Keltner calls them the 8 wonders of life. And the effect they have on our bodies is awe-inspiring. Awe activates the vagus nerve, sometimes called the soul nerve in our bodies, which helps us feel compassion. Awe lowers our blood pressure, releases oxytocin, improves the immune system, clears our minds, lowers stress levels, helps us feel more connected to each other and to nature, makes us more altruistic. 20 years into teaching happiness, says Keltner, I now have an answer to the age-old question of how to live a good life. Find awe. Did you notice what's missing from Keltner's list of 8 and what's missing from our church's awe board? What doesn't bring us awe are things like money, Facebook, TikTok, smartphones, Teslas, Gucci bags. Basically, anything related to materialism, status signaling, or consumerism. We can't wear awe. We can't buy awe. We can't show off our awe to colleagues or friends. No, what brings us awe is encountering vastness, feeling inspired, feeling small and fragile. It doesn't require much time or money or much burning of fossil fuels. Engaging the religious sensibility, the sense of awe, said Carl Sagan, is as simple as looking up on a clear night. Awe is awakened when we ride a wave of music to new heights or ride an actual wave in a vast ocean. It's awakened when we witness someone putting their life on the line to offer help, or when we get lost in a work of art, delight in a baby's smile, hike in a forest, pause atop a ski slope to take in the landscape below, savor the heavy silence in Death Valley, peer into the depths of a canyon or gorge, gasp at beauty or a new discovery. These are the kinds of things that bring us awe, that put us in touch with transcendence, as the theologians call it. Awe, said Jewish theologian Abraham Heschel, is at the root of faith. It's the gateway to faith. It opens us to trust that we're all part of something much grander than our individual selves. It puts our lives in perspective. Which reminds me of a Calvin and Hobbes cartoon that I've shared with you before. Both of them are looking up at the stars, and Calvin says, if people sat outside and looked at the stars each night, I bet they'd live a lot differently. How so? Asks Hobbes. Well, when you look into infinity, says Calvin, you realize that there are more important things than what people do most of the day. The story in our religious tradition that taps into our hard wiring to feel awe is the Easter story. And I wonder, as I read Matthew's version of the story, whether he's packed so much fantastical imagery into a mere 10-verse narrative because he's straining to recount with words something that breaks language. Can words ever fully capture the feeling of awe? Matthew strained to describe something earth-shaking, something that completely shifted the terrain. And so he mentions an actual earthquake, a great earthquake, he calls it. Then he mentions a flash of lightning in the form of an angel who heaved the stone aside to open the tomb. Earthquakes and lightning, wild awe, one of the 8 wonders of life. Participants in Dr. Keltner's study who experienced nature's power, an earthquake or a hurricane or a massive thunderstorm, describe feeling fear mixed with awe. And that's what the first witnesses of the empty tomb felt. The women were afraid and awestruck and then filled with joy, while the guards stationed at the tomb shook with fear and then cowered. They became like dead men, says Matthew, floored by what they saw. Interesting side note, Matthew weaves in layers of irony here. The Greek word Matthew uses to describe the guards shaking in fear is where we get our word seismic from. So, the guards standing guard over the dead man in the tomb quaked when they felt an earthquake, and then they became like dead men when the dead man revived. I'm not sure if any of that is significant, but it's clever storytelling. Fear turns to wonder when the characters in the story begin to speak. The angel says to the women, "Do not fear," and then invites them to peek into the empty tomb. Imagine the physiology of their awe in that moment. Did they feel chills, a holy shudder? Did the hair on their arms stand on end? Did they gasp or say, "Whoa"? All are expressions of awe. We feel awe, says Dr. Keltner, when we encounter something vast that transcends our current understanding of the world, when our current knowledge is not up to the task of making sense of it. An empty tomb would qualify. The women then hurried off, and they felt, says Matthew, fear and great joy, wonder and happiness, awe and elation. On the way, they met Jesus, a moment of epiphany, another of the 8 wonders of life and sources of awe. And then Matthew says they worshiped, religious experience, another of the 8 wonders of life and sources of awe. Easter is a story of awe. In just 10 verses, 3 of the 8 wonders of life are mentioned: wild awe, epiphany, religious experience. It's a story with language that heaves and strains under the weight of an experience that transcends a current understanding of the world. Language and knowledge are not up to the task of making sense of it. It's a capstone story on a life of awe. Peruse the Gospels through the lens of awe, and you'll see it everywhere in the life of Jesus. Angels singing a heavenly song at his birth at Christmas. Shepherds gaping in wonder. Wise men gazing up at a star. And then there's the morally beautiful life of Jesus as an adult, this towering figure in the Gospels, as G.K. Chesterton once called him. There's his zeal for justice and peace, his social protests against the powerful, his tongue of fire that called out the hypocrites. And then there's his unflagging compassion and love for society's least and lost and left out, from embracing lepers whom no one would touch, to eating with tax collectors whom no one would befriend, to telling prostitutes who long to be treated as human beings instead of as objects that they too are children of God, to his gentle care of the broken and the bullied who needed mercy, to his prayer from the cross that asked God of all things to forgive those who canceled and crucified him. His was a life of such multi-layered moral beauty that it makes you gasp. Moral beauty is also one of the 8 sources of awe. And of course, the final chapter of his life was a story of awe at Easter. The awe-inspiring life of Jesus is the reason we're still doing this thing we call church some 2,000 years later. The challenge to us on this 41st day of awe is to turn this towering figure's life into moral beauty today. And it's not like we've got to reinvent the wheel in order to do this. There are examples of moral beauty everywhere. The life and ministry of Dr. King comes to mind. The sacred work of raw tools blacksmiths who melt down guns and transform them into garden tools comes to mind. Racial justice activists come to mind. Climate activists come to mind. Young people protesting gun violence across the country and in the Tennessee legislature come to mind. Our own denomination, the United Church of Christ, comes to mind, taking a stand to support transgender teens when too many across the country have dehumanized them and imagined them to be monsters instead of seeing them for who they are, beloved children of God. Moral beauty is out there. People are carrying on this awe-inspiring work of Jesus, even if they don't name him as the source. But I want to close this morning with one example in particular of moral beauty. It's told by writer Colum McCann, who shares a story about two fathers, one an Israeli named Rami, and the other a Palestinian named Bassam. Bassam and Rami travel the world together, sharing their story. Both fathers lost daughters in the ongoing conflict. Rami's daughter was 14 when a suicide bomber took her life. Bassam's daughter was 10 when an Israeli soldier shot her. Both men could have sought revenge and contributed to the cycle of violence. Rami calls revenge the easy way. If you kill one of mine, he says, I will kill one of yours. I will kill 10 of yours. And the dead one naturally has an uncle or a brother or a cousin or a wife who wants to kill you back. And then you want to kill them back again, another 10 times over. Instead of revenge and the cycle of violence, both men walk the harder path. They joined an organization called Parents Circle, which is made up of Palestinian and Israeli parents who've lost children, but who've chosen peace instead of violence. The first night Rami attended a Parents Circle meeting, he stood outside before entering. I watched those people arriving, he says. The first group were Israelis. One of them was a Holocaust survivor. More and more of them arrived. But then I saw something else, something completely new to me, to my eyes, my mind, my heart, my brain. I was standing there and I saw a few Palestinians arrive on a bus. I was flabbergasted that I would be sitting in a room with them, thinking, breathing Palestinians. And I remember seeing this lady in a black, traditional Palestinian dress with a headscarf. Someone who looked like she could have been the mother of the bomber who took my daughter. She was slow and elegant, stepping down from the bus, walking in my direction. And then I saw it. She had a picture of her daughter clutched to her chest. She walked past me. I couldn't move. And this was like an earthquake inside me. This woman had lost her child. This lifted the lid from my eyes. My grief and her grief, the same grief. I went inside to meet these people. They were shaking my hand, hugging me, crying with me. I was so deeply touched, so deeply moved. I was completely cleaved open. Bassam says, it's a disaster to discover the humanity of your enemy, because then they're not your enemy anymore. They just can't be. And then he adds, it's not written anywhere that we have to go on killing each other. Heroes make friends with their enemies. Sometimes, he says, it feels like we're trying to draw water from the ocean with a spoon. But peace is a fact. It's a matter of time. Look at South Africa, Northern Ireland, Germany, Japan. Nothing is impossible. The question for us is not whether the awe of moral beauty is out there in the world. It is. Easter is out there. Examples of it are everywhere. The question is whether we'll have the courage to, as Jesus once said, go and do likewise. Amen.